This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kelly, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. It is almost arrived. NBA season is right around the corner. I mean, we are just literally hours from NBA tip-off and a new season emerging. And we have got a great show on tap for you to get you ready, get you primed up for this upcoming NBA season. Like all NBA websites and all NBA shows, you got to have an award predict show, man. So that's exactly what this is. And in order to give those predictions, you know, I got to roll out the red carpet, get the light shine brightly. The spotlight is in perfect condition. And I got to make sure that I got my humbled guests on board to help us discuss one of the more highly anticipated upcoming NBA season and the possible awards that could be won. You know, I'm going to do it with my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, Dimag, former Dimag contributor, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Mr. Shaw, welcome back. Are you ready to rock and roll, brother?
Of course, my dude. As always, salute to all the fans, listeners of NBA Baseline. This is a great show we have lined up with an amazing guest about a topic that, again, all fans have their predictions, things they like to see coming up as the upcoming season unfolds, if you will. And we're no different. We're fans and we're analysts. So we're going to give you what our thoughts are on, you know, some of these award winners of this upcoming season, but with a little bit of a twist as we dig deep into some of the history of these awards and why some of them suck. You know what I mean? Some of them just don't have the right criteria for what they're being awarded on, but we'll get into that, man, especially with our special guest.
Yeah, in a few moments, we're going to have our man Kelly Scaletta. He's a premier writer for BBall, Breakdown, Dime, Up Rocks, Bleacher Report, and FanRag Sports. He's been doing it for quite some time, and he's going to help spread some knowledge about some of these awards and, you know, how the criteria has actually panned out and whether or not it meets the conditions of, you know, the players that have been elected to win these awards in years past and what our expectations are going to be for these guys for this upcoming 2017-18 season. So this is going to be a great discussion through each and every single one of those awards. And we're talking about the most improved all the way down to the MVP. So definitely stay on board with us. This is going to be a great show. For all of the new listeners, welcome. For all of our old listeners, what's up? And for all of our people who are just fans of the NBA, keep us locked. Be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We're available on all the major platforms: iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, iHeartRadio, Google Music, Roku channel. So be sure to download any one of those platforms. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the NBA. Shout outs to our people at Almighty Ballers Network. Be sure to get all the goods that you need to know about the NBA via Almighty Ballers. So go to www.almightyballersradio and be able to check us out. We are also available on the Almighty Ballers Network. You know how we do. You know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
down to the bone gristle.
Kelly, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast and our segment here of the breakdown, where we basically give it to you straight. We are going to give you our predictions of this year's 2017-18 NBA awards. I know it's kind of crazy, but you know we got to do it. I mean, this is how we pay the bucks. All of us, you know, have to be the predictors of these things. So, you know, at some point, one of us is going to wind up getting egg on our faces because we're going to be making outlandish predictions. But to make sure that this is something that is worth our while, and we don't want to be alone in this effort, who none better than to have an opportunity to share their thoughts about who should be taking these awards for this upcoming season. We have a really great guest on board with us. This guy is a premier writer. You can usually catch his articles and his pieces on FanRag Sports, Bleacher Report, Dime Magazine, and BBall Breakdown. The incomparable Kelly Scaletta is joining us here this week on the Baseline NBA podcast. Mr. Scaletta, thank you for hopping on board with this, man.
Hey, no problem. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So we usually get around this time of the year where we're either itching for some basketball games to happen or we just basically start catching the Jones and say, let's just start throwing out predictions about who we think is going to win these awards for this upcoming season. And I know just recently you actually have posted your article giving your perspective about who should be possibly taking these awards. How for yourself, for your process, before we get into these predictions, how big a deal was that for you? Was this like, in comparison to last year where, you were like basically up at night, knocking down 4 cups of coffee before you actually wrote your piece? I mean, how much tougher is this year, given all the movement that's happened in this off season, for you to be able to make these predictions?
Oh, everything is, it's especially like when you get into the season predictions for teams and stuff. It's so much is just chaos right now, because you don't know how. There's all these players that are shifting teams. 8 players that were in both the Sports Illustrated and ESPN top 30 switch teams. In all 8 cases, they joined another player that was the top 30 player. There's just so many star tandems now, and you don't know how they're all going to fit together. And so. Yeah, it's kind of a guessing game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this league is forming like Voltron. That's just basically what's happening right now. Like, everybody wants their Voltron. And so now, to hell with the awards. Like, it used to be picture perfect. Like, this guy really should be taking the MVP. This guy looks like he's the odds-on favorite to be Rookie of the Year. And then all of a sudden, you got 2 guys who have, season-ending injuries and what's supposed to be their rookie year now wind up being in a class where there's now 5 deep of rookies possibly taking the Rookie of the Year. It's absolutely crazy. So let's go ahead and get right into our predictions. And we're going to start off first with the Most Improved Player of the Year award. Now, last year, it's hard pressed for anyone to make the argument that Giannis Antetokounmpo, aka the Greek Freak, was not deserving of this award. I mean, across the board, his numbers were MVP-like probably in some conversations for last season, given what he did for the Milwaukee Bucks. But he took away this award. And Shaw, I'm going to start with you. Who do you have lined up to be your Most Improved Player of the Year for 2017-18?
Yeah, this is the award that I think bothers me the most. I have a couple of them that really irritate me. This one and the 6th man is just like, they get under my skin because the criteria is, I mean, all the criteria is a little bit arbitrary, but this one is just like, sometimes is it the guy who just now has the most opportunity? Is it the guy whose stats have just increased the most from whatever the case may be from the season ago? And I guess it's a combination of all of those things. Lots of guys can be put in this conversation, and oftentimes it's, rookies now going into their 2nd year. So a guy like Buddy Hield, a guy like Chris Dunn come to mind, maybe even a guy like Miles Turner with a great opportunity, in Indiana. But my pick is actually going to be Aaron Gordon. I think finally getting to play full-time power forward with the Orlando Magic now in a situation, while Orlando is not a great team, a lot of the offense is going to run through him, and he's not going to just kind of have to pick his spots, if you will, and get offensive rebounds and slash the lane. I think they actually run some plays for him to be a focal point of what they do. He's extended his game now to the point where he can hit the 3-point shot, has a decent jumper, can still dunk like all hell. And again, is a great rebounder as well too. So I think going to that 4 spot now, getting roughly probably 30 to 35 minutes a night should really help him, and I think he's going to be the Most Improved Player of the season.
All right. I like that selection, Shaw. I find it to be a very interesting selection in itself, because you're banking on the fact that it's these unknown players that are probably going to get some shine. Kelly, I'm kind of curious from your perspective of who you like to see taking this Most Improved Player of the Year award.
Yeah, Aaron Gordon's a good choice. I like that. This one's the one I have the least amount of confidence in out of all of them. I picked Gary Harris. I think he was kind of right on the verge of breaking out last year. I can see him putting up 20. He has a really nice chemistry with Nurkic, and I can see him dropping around 20 points a night, and he plays good defense. And the Nuggets are probably going to be pushing for a 6th seed, somewhere around there. So I think he'll get the award over somebody like Aaron Gordon, who's not even going to sniff the playoffs.
Man, this has been a tough one for me, because what the NBA has done over the last couple of years is just basically said to heck with the people that we consider are already mainstream players, or we already know that they're going to continually improve. So like they gave it to CJ McCollum, who I'm not discrediting to say he wasn't deserving of most improved player of the year. But to Shaw's point, it just opens up a conundrum about how you're supposed to depict, what a person is when you say they're most improved. Like in what dynamic are we talking towards this? Because look, given what's happened in this offseason, you can make the argument that Kyrie Irving has an opportunity to be the most improved. Like he can essentially be a guy that averages 25 points per game to being, the NBA scoring leader. Gordon Hayward has an opportunity to be most improved playing alongside a point guard like Kyrie Irving. And then you could also even make the argument that Joel Embiid might be most improved because he didn't win Rookie of the Year, although deserving, because he didn't have enough number of games. But given the way that this offense is going to be built around him, this guy could easily catapult himself up probably another 7, 8, 10 points per game, given how the predictions are that the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be one of the most improved teams in the NBA. In the end, I hate saying this. I'm going out on a limb and saying this because it's crazy, I know. But I'm actually thinking that they might give it to Kyrie Irving because he's not going to be looked at in the same way as a person who's going to be considered in the MVP conversation. But if the Boston Celtics are going to be as successful as people are saying he's going to easily have to be their biggest scorer. He's going to easily have to shoot the basketball a lot better than he did in Cleveland. And he's also going to wind up being the best distributor of the basketball, probably, meaning he's going to up his assist totals. And I think all of that may play on a team that is going to be highly successful in this Eastern Conference. Whether or not it means that there's still going to be a top 1, 2, or 3 type of team, it still means that he's going to be looked at because they're not going to be considered for any of those particular type of awards. But I just feel with the climate of how the offseason is played out, that might be what might happen. So I'm going on crazy land with my prediction here, and I'm going with Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, man, that's wild.
I know.
It's because I just think, and not to say that it can't happen, but again, we've talked about Kyrie on our show and situations like this previously. Did James Harden, did he even sniff most improved player, or what the case may be when he left his roster and those stuff? Like you kind of wonder, like his level of superstar is already too high, for voters, if you will, to kind of say, all right, you're that much better now. Now again, if something does crazy happen, Boston wins 60+ games or whatever the case may be, and he averages 27 and 8 and 5 or something like that, then yeah, I guess maybe so. But I feel like, he may really level out with some higher efficiency numbers, and that would be, very, very interesting to see if he could, kind of get that under his wing, if you will. Kelly, what are your thoughts on maybe a Kyrie Irving or any superstar, taking that next level to be a most improved player?
What it is when you get into that category of player, they start getting MVP consideration instead of MIP consideration. And one example is Stephen Curry year before last, where he had that huge jump in everything, and he was having this all-world season, and people were saying he could arguably be the most valuable player and the most improved player. But I think once you get to that level, people say, most improved player isn't the same thing. Like it's a lower caliber of award or something. So like Derrick Rose didn't win it when he won MVP. He could have easily been described as the most improved player. If Kyrie Irving has this incredible season, he'll probably finish near the top in MVP voting. I don't think he'll win most improved player.
All right, well then it's settled. I am a lunatic. I am completely on crazy, and I'm completely okay with that. Callie Ward Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast with our special guest Kelly Scaletta, who is joining us here to help give our predictions of this year's upcoming awards for the NBA season. Let's go ahead and focus our attention now to the sixth man of the year. And much like this award, it's crazy to me because if there's any kind of injury, I don't know how much you count the idea that a guy that comes off the bench actually has to assert starting minutes, but, scores like he's somewhat of a starter. And, all the versatility that we are now seeing with the way coaches are using their rosters, let it not be said that the dominance of Jamal Crawford. You know, this was the Jamal Crawford Award. I think that when he retires from the game, if he'll ever retire from the game, it'll be probably changed to the Jamal Crawford award than the Sixth Man of the Year award. But last year, it was Eric Gordon. And listen, there's a lot of players right now that, given the way that they played last season and the way that the rosters are set up, there's some additional names that could be thrown out there. So I'm curious, Kelly, who do you have lined up to be your Sixth Man of the Year award for this upcoming season?
I'm picking Eric Gordon to repeat, because here's the thing about this award. It goes to the highest scorer off the bench. And, you know, it's what you're alluding to with the Jamal Crawford Award. It doesn't go to the best player off the bench, which is what Sixth Man of the Year should imply. So players that should be getting consideration for this award over Eric Gordon are guys like Andre Iguodala, who have a huge impact on their team. On both ends of the court. And like Iggy makes that whole small ball death lineup work. He's incredible. Most people know how important Iguodala is to the Warriors. That's why they gave him that huge paycheck. But let's face it, it's not the Sixth Man award. It's the best scorer off the bench award. And if Jamal Crawford is going to get it 3 years in a row, or 3 times, and including times where, I mean, he was just chucking the ball, you know. He did not even deserve 2 of those awards. But it's whoever scores the most points off the bench. I don't see anybody beating out Eric Gordon for that. He's going to have Harden and Chris Paul feeding him the ball, and he's going to have so many open looks, and he's a really nice 3-point shooter. And, you know, it's not to take anything away from him. He had a great season last year, and he's actually not a bad defender either. So it's not that he doesn't deserve the award. I just think that the award is sort of misapplied, or at least according to the name of it. It's not, you know, it should be best scorer off the bench if that's what you're going to make it. So who should be and who will be, that, you know, are 2 different questions. If you really give it to the best Sixth Man, I think it should be Iggy. But since it goes to the best scorer off the bench, it'll go to Eric Gordon again.
Well, let's unpack that for a second before I get into my thing, because I'm definitely on the same side as Kelly here when it comes to that's what it is. It's the best scorer. But Kelly, in your opinion, why in this day and age, when our voting members of the media are now becoming more analytically crazed, if you will, why isn't more consideration given to kind of the all-around play and impact that some of these better players may have, as opposed to just scoring? Like, because it seems we're analyzing every single thing. Why not analyze this award and make it the person who has the most impact and not just the best scorer?
I'm not sure that the voting members of the media are as analytically driven. I think that a lot of the voters are kind of the older members in the media.
Right.
And, you know, like, this is a little bit off topic, but it's topic adjacent. You know, this whole narrative last year that came up around DeMar DeRozan being this great mid-range shooter, and how he was challenging the convention that, you know, analytics were, you know, the all the rage and everything, you know, and he was thriving as this mid-range shooter early in the season. Everybody was all crazy about that. But, you know, by the time the season ended, he was just another chucker that wasn't all that efficient. You know, and he had a few good games, but there was this like need to defend old school basketball that, you know, like almost like a reflexive response. And there's this kind of curmudgeon attitude about analytics with some of the older people in the media. Not all of them, but enough of them that I think that they just look at box score numbers still, and they're not as concerned with something like real plus minus that shows what an impact Iguodala has. So, you know, I just I don't know that it's the analysts that are really looking at the analytics and kind of, and I don't even want to just say analytics because the best analysts don't even, you know, like they look at analytics, but they they don't just consider analytics. They consider film just as much. But I think they consider the whole scope of what a player contributes more than just, looking at the box scores and stuff like that. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think the voting members of the media don't represent the media that we read on a daily basis, if that makes sense.
Well, listen, in a perfect world, I look at the impact player, the player who comes up and really change the dynamic of a basketball team night in and night out. So you can make the argument that a guy like Norman Powell should be considered as a sixth man of the year last year for the Toronto Raptors. A guy like Jonathan Simmons. I mean, look at what he did, especially with the impact that happened to Kawhi Leonard. And he did that. He didn't do it, absolutely consistent through 82 games, but he was very much, a product of that he was an important cog, and unfortunately that doesn't get noticed. If I'm gonna keep this within the realm of what we have already as understood right now, is to say, okay, this is the sixth man of the year based on how we have voted or decided upon the last previous seasons. I agree. I think there's no question that Eric Gordon is a standard and probably maintains the status quo. I just have an eerily weird feeling about he may not be the highest scorer of this basketball team, just simply because the dynamic, I think, has changed somewhat and how Mike D'Antoni is going to probably use him. So with that being said, I'm kind of leaning on Josh Richardson as being the sixth man of the year. And this is only because if the Miami Heat is not starting Dion Waiters, if Dion Waiters is being used like how he was used last year, he's going to wind up being the sixth man of the year. I just look at the way that the Miami Heat are structured, and they're desperately still going to need someone scoring that basketball outside of Whiteside, outside of Dragic. And what those guys were doing minus injuries was pretty phenomenal. I don't think that's supposed to change the plan. If it were me, I think it should be Dion Waiters. But given the contract that he was given, he might wind up being the starter if something else doesn't change. And then that opens the door for a guy like Richardson if he's not being moved to the 3 spot to be as a starter, which I don't think is going to be the case. So that's where I'm leaning on that. Like, again, I'm the crazy one in this conversation. So, don't worry. I have my reservation booked at Bellevue when this is all said and done.
Well, you good, man. Don't worry about that at all, because I think I'm trying to go against conventional wisdom, even though I know where we're at right now and in the state of the league and kind of how the voting members are what way they're gonna go. Yeah, Gordon is probably gonna win it. I agree with you though. A guy like Norman Powell, a guy like Andre Iguodala, they have great impact. Powell's gonna have so much meaning for Toronto this year. Like offensively, defensively, he's going to be playing so many minutes for them. I think he's going to really take a step forward, if you will. Teodosic from the Clippers, I think he's going to be a great guy coming off the bench. If Lance Stevenson can stay healthy, he's going to have great impact for the Indiana Pacers off the bench and be a guy who closes out games for them as well too. But here's my off the reservation pick. I'm actually going to go with Rudy Gay from the San Antonio Spurs. Again, I know Gordon offensively should win it, but Gay is a guy who can still compete offensively and still be impactful for the Spurs, I think, this upcoming season, especially to what you said a little bit earlier, CL, in terms of he may get some spot starts because guys are resting, if you will. Pop is going to rest, Leonard, might rest Aldridge, whatever. If Gay himself is healthy, he can still average 15 or 16 off the bench for them. And I think LMA is going to have to play some more small ball, go back to playing that 5 because Pop kind of recognizes Gasol doesn't always have it out there. So that's my way out there. Nobody's going to agree with me, and I understand that. But I'm going to go with Rudy Gay for sixth man of the year.
Kelly, can you imagine a time after seeing, when Rudy Gay was first drafted from out of, the University of Connecticut, and what has happened or what has transpired through his NBA career, that at this particular juncture, we're actually talking about him as a possible candidate for a sixth man of the year award?
Yeah, that's weird. I've never been all that high on Rudy Gay. And I think he was it's not like he's a young guy, but I feel like he kind of just missed the window that fits his game. If he came in like 5 years earlier, I think his career would have had a different arc. Like in the early 2000s when it was, like that kind of ISO player, that, mid-range post-up player.
Right.
like the game was all geared towards that type of guy. And then, he was just a little too young for that. So, then we started paying more attention to 3-pointers, and he was never a great shooter. He was never a great defender. I just wonder if you can win with a guy like that on your team. But Popovich is going to Popovich. So if anybody can really make the most out of Rudy Gay, it's him.
Well, we're gonna make sure we're gonna tease everybody into, because then it's gonna kind of bring up that next question when we get to the Executive of the Year award. So I'm glad you brought up Melo. I'm glad you brought up the mystery of the mid range and whether or not this is gonna have an impact for a couple of teams, because given some of the moves that some of these executives and GMs have made to bolster their rosters to compete against teams like the Golden State Warriors, it may beg the question as to whether or not you're going to lean on the side of one of these guys as winning that award, given the kind of players or personnel that they added to their roster. So we'll get to that in a moment. Callie Warrenshaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, with our special guest, Kelly Scaletta. He's a featured writer. You can always catch him on FanRag Sports, Bleacher Report, Dime, and he's also a premier writer for BBall Breakdown. Be sure to check him out on Twitter at Kelly Scaletta. Okay, let's go ahead and change gears now. Let's talk about the Kia NBA Rookie of the Year. Now, last year's winner was Malcolm Brogdon, and when you look at the numbers, they don't jump out and say Rookie of the Year / Phenom, right? 10 points per game, 4.2 assists, shot around 40% from three, 87% from the free throw line. And I think a lot of people have just chalked it up to say he was the only live body that stayed on the basketball court that was labeled as a rookie that's going to wind up winning this award. But to Shaw's point, it was pretty interesting because last year, Saric, he believes, should have been deserving of that award. He knew he probably wasn't going to get that. So now we talk about this year's Rookie of the Year award. And if there was somebody who probably would have been a runaway favorite, would have been Ben Simmons had he not got injured last year. But now it's a very interesting class of ball players that are also added to this list, guys like Lonzo Ball, Dennis Smith Jr. So I'm going to start with you, Kelly. Who do you have pegged to be your Rookie of the Year for this year?
Yeah, this one is it's interesting. I have Lonzo Ball pegged right now, but not with a lot of confidence. I think he has gotten the early season buzz about him. Like, people don't even talk about Holt. Then everybody forgot about Ben Simmons until the preseason, and he started zipping these incredible passes all over the court. Ben Simmons has a chance to. Lonzo Ball, and this is another thing that goes into these awards that I think sort of, should get realized more often. The LA and New York writers dominate the award voting. So,
and it certainly doesn't help when most of these writers are being featured on the main sports outlets like ESPN, Fox Sports, Bleacher Report, which means their perspective and thoughts are going to carry a lot more weight and gravitate to the direction that people are going to have about making these assertions that these guys are going to be, already predicted as or walking away with that award.
Right. Exactly. And so being a Laker just automatically gives you an advantage. So I think, and then, of course, and then, there's the whole thing with Lonzo's dad. He's kind of his publicist too. So, Ball has the edge, but eventually, he's going to have to show it on the court. And he's had some nice passing games. I think Ben Simmons can give him a real challenge. I'm not sure Dennis Smith Jr. is going to be consistent enough. If you want a real sleeper here, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, but the Frank
Ntilikina.
I think he could have a big year. I think Markkanen can have a big year. I think that this year will make up for last year's Sucky of the Year award.
Oh, God.
It was like that a second rounder. I know what you're saying about Joel Embiid, but he wasn't drafted last year either. Like, this is amazing to me that not a single player that was drafted in the first round even got a first place vote for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, it's kind of
Right.
twisted.
Like-
It's absolutely twisted, you know?
Like a player that was drafted in the first round last year, I mean, not one of them got a first place vote for Rookie of the Year. How is that even feasible? You know, that it's just the worst rookie class ever. So, yeah, that's why I call it the Sucky of the Year award for last year. It was just horrible. So anyway, I think this year will make up for it. I think it's going to be incredible.
So, Shaw, you know, Kelly brings up a really interesting point. So I'm going to put this on you to kind of address this, because I think, to me, the bigger question that's going to come of this, and it's going to make us question the way that we're looking at the Rookie of the Year award and how, you know, and who should be deserving of it. Are we talking about this because of how dazzling these guys are coming? Because this is going to be an exciting class of rookies that are going to come in, and they're in a position where the spotlight will definitely be on them. I don't know if it's NBA marketing or just that because we were so disappointed from last year's class that we're clamoring for these guys to actually step up and do so. And you got a couple that have spilled over, you know, to Kelly's point, because we've been talking about how this whole injury thing seems to play that effect on it. But are we looking at this from a perspective of how exciting these guys are going to be, or will the numbers truly dictate us saying that, just in the same way that we're giving these awards for these other, type of awards, excuse me, whether it's Defensive Player of the Year or if it's the Most Improved Player or Sixth Man of the Year, will the numbers dictate something that's deserving, which was like last year's contradiction, where a guy like Malcolm Brogdon wouldn't have even been sniffed to have been considered as a first place, you know, Rookie of the Year mention or consideration?
Well, yeah, I think it's a combination of all those things, but the main thing is with any rookie is opportunity. And I don't know, outside of Brogdon and even Sark towards the end, although they're classified as rookies and you can say whatever you want to say about them, not too many of the rookies had the opportunity to be great, if you will, and got consistent minutes, you know, in that mold. Brandon Ingram, that wasn't his life, you know, as a Laker last year. He was kind of stuck on that roster. He was starting off a little bit, came off the bench and started towards the end of the year, but he just wasn't good enough. You know, and I think there's a difference with this year's class, where with all the movement that's happened, a lot of these rookies now are going to be impact players. They're going to be asked to do a lot. Some of them, in the case of Lonzo Ball and Dennis Smith Jr., are given the keys to their franchise immediately as starting point guards to go out there and do what you need to do. Ben Simmons as a point forward now coming in after obviously coming off the injury. My problem with the Simmons case is that because Fultz is there and because Embiid is there, and although Embiid is not a rookie, obviously, I'm concerned about just the shine of Embiid and the love affair that fans have with Embiid. And Simmons could be going up there and playing really great basketball, but will he get the love that's necessary because everyone is so stuck on what Embiid does on a regular basis? So that's why my pick is actually going to be Dennis Smith Jr., because I feel like in Dallas, they understand that they need to turn the page. And, you know, Dirk's time is past, and he's still going to be a good veteran and guy go out there that can give you, you know, points in the teens, if you will, playing center now. Harrison Barnes had a great season last year. But I don't think he strikes fear into anybody. I think they're going to let Dennis Smith make all the mistakes he possibly can, and get all the minutes he can. And I think he's going to end up capturing this award and stealing it away from Lonzo Ball, who, again, I think is good, and I think is going to be good for a long time as a Laker. But I just don't see the offensive capability in him in this first year. Now I think Smith will have a great opportunity to score, distribute, and even grab a couple of rebounds and statistically put up the numbers that are necessary.
This could be the first year from my perspective where we're looking at a player with a balance of numbers, points, rebounds, assists. And I think the only thing that's in question for Ben Simmons is his efficiency in scoring the basketball. Like, will he score with a high field goal percentage, low field goal percentage, that sort of thing? I feel like they're the cornerstones for the Philadelphia 76ers. If we're talking about them doing anything this year that's even worth all of the hype about the process, it's going to come down to what Ben Simmons does, which is why I think it puts him in the forefront of us really considering him as the Rookie of the Year. Not to take anything from Lonzo Ball, and certainly not taking anything away, who I kind of would agree with you, Shaw, that Dennis Smith Jr., I think, is more in line to probably take this Rookie of the Year award. But then to Kelly's point, because we're talking about two major markets, right? And we may not talk about that in the same breath with Philadelphia, but we do say that because they are one of the established franchises. They were one of the oldest teams in the NBA. So there is a market, and there will always be a market there for that. It's the house of Dr. J. So Ben Simmons is coming in, and he's now that cornerstone with Joel Embiid. There's going to be a spotlight and excitement on what he does each and every single night. And Lonzo Ball on the West Coast is going to have a spotlight on him each and every single night. I think it's going to wind up going to Ben Simmons if I'm splitting the baby between the two type of philosophies that we've just discussed. Whereas a guy like Dennis Smith, from a numbers perspective, to your point, Shaw, I think would wind up being the better out of the three of them, simply because of the impact that I think he's going to be able to make for the Dallas Mavericks and what the emphasis is going to be about his role for that basketball team. In the end, I'm looking at Ben Simmons. I know that sounds kind of crazy, and maybe that's just the safe pick, but I really think that the fact that this guy is like been dubbed as the second coming of LeBron, playing in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is expecting to make this playoffs in the Eastern Conference. He's going to be a big reason why. And I think if his numbers stay true to the fold, he's going to have better numbers and put his team in a better position to do more than what Lonzo Ball is probably going to do for the Los Angeles Lakers. Kelly, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast with our special guest, Kelly Scaletta. Be sure to check him out on Twitter at Kelly Scaletta. Let's go ahead and get right into the Executive of the Year. All right. So here's an interesting tidbit here. Executive of the Year award has either gone to R.C. Buford or Bob Myers each of the last 4 years. So I have to believe that somebody else is going to have to win this award, given all of the craziness that has happened just in this offseason, right? With the moves made by Morey, the moves made by Presti. I'm going to start with you, Shaw. Who do you have dubbed to be the Executive of the Year? And no, you cannot use Bob Myers or R.C. Buford.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. In an interest of time, I think I'll speed this one up too. I think, going in, it would be hard pressed not to pick Sam Presti. The haul he's gotten to improve that roster. And again, we still don't know how well or if it will work at all. But he took more than acceptable risk this offseason, and getting Paul George and Carmelo Anthony for peanuts, really. And now he's won over his MVP. Westbrook has signed for X amount of years now to continue to stay there. This has been nothing but a win-win for Sam Presti this offseason, and they have a potential to win, 55 to 60 games as well too, if all pieces come together. The defense is a little bit improved, our star power is a little bit more improved. Another year with Billy Donovan as a coach there, kind of getting his system into play. I can't see right now how another GM can edge out Sam Presti this upcoming season.
Sam Presti didn't already win it. I mean, he got Carmelo Anthony and Paul George for a half-eaten bag of Pringles and a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Oh, I thought that was that was the going rate to get Boogie Cousins last year.
At least anyway. the where the Thunder as a franchise were at, on the precipice of they had Harden, Durant, and Westbrook, and then they lost Harden, they lost Durant. They were on the verge of losing Westbrook. And then if he doesn't do something, like what happens to the whole franchise? And then to just pull these two trades out of nowhere. How did that happen? I remember the day before the Carmelo trade, and there was all this talk about, Carmelo's approved the third team. And everybody's like speculating who it might be. Nobody even speculated it might be the Thunder. And then it's the Thunder, and you're like, holy crap, how did that happen? It was just such a shock. And how Presti managed to pull all of this off, and then to turn that into Westbrook signing the extension. I don't know what happens this season. It's possible Paul George leaves next year and Carmelo Anthony leaves next year. But Westbrook isn't going anywhere, and Presti he didn't just make good trades for a franchise. He saved a franchise from basically collapsing. He really deserves the award, even though I'm not a big Carmelo fan. I think he really did some amazing things to make all of that work.
Wow. this is going to be a tough one for me, because I think Sam Presti would in all, like right now, we can just honestly say Sam Presti's, ahead. And maybe you can make the argument that Daryl Morey follows right behind. I think Danny Ainge went one move too many to take himself out of the consideration of Executive of the Year. But the one Executive of the Year nominee, so to speak, that I'm not hearing about that might wind up getting some kind of consideration depending on how they roll or how they play is Tom Tibbs and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm on the mindset of Sam Presti is going to wind up winning it because his ace in the hole is having Russell Westbrook, and the moves being made is that they're definitely gunning for the Golden State Warriors and putting themselves in a position to be among one of the two best teams in the Western Conference, or possibly in the NBA. And while we're talking about how there's an expectation that the Minnesota Timberwolves are supposed to be in the playoffs this year, probably will still not happen if he did not get Jimmy Butler and did not get Jamal Crawford and all of these assets around, the big cat and getting Andrew Wiggins, on his extension and everything like that to keep the core of this team. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to go with Presti on this one to be the guy, but I really feel like a person who should be wind up getting consideration depending on how the Timberwolves perform this year, if they're like a top 3, top 4 team in the Western Conference, Tom Tibbs would probably get that consideration as well, too, for the kind of roster he's putting together. Am I off base on this one, Shaw?
No, I think that's an acceptable, more than acceptable choice, if you will, too. And again, if Presti didn't pull off that magic, if he just got Paul George and then re-sign Russ, that would still be argument enough. But then I think Tibbs would definitely be the guy, because of what they do. And then again, all this is still going to have to play itself out, right? So Minnesota has to make the playoffs. And I don't think they can be like a 7 seed. They need to get up to like maybe 5, 6. I don't know if they can get home court advantage, and that might be a little too lofty, but you need to get into that mid-range, if you will, of the playoffs, and I think he's still going to get consideration. But there's a lot of guys out there, and general managers that made moves. You can argue, hey, did Danny Ainge, could she get consideration, bringing in Kyrie, getting Gordon Hayward, things of that nature too. So that's why I think it's very interesting. But I agree with what Kelly said. And again, right now, I don't know how Sam Presti would lose the award, but all the arguments are going to be valid, I think, for multiple general managers.
All right, let's go ahead and focus our attention now to the Coach of the Year award. Last year, Mike D'Antoni, and give it to that man. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with what the Houston Rockets did. I don't know if it's a level of overachievement or just simply put, everyone now believes in Mike. We like Mike now. But this year, I think is now going to be a much broader window to look through for us to determine this. So I'm going to start with you, Kelly. You give us your pick on who you think should be the Coach of the Year.
I think it's going to go to Brett Brown. The 76ers, I think they're going to win around 45 games. I think they're going to actually challenge for home court advantage in the Eastern Conference, which, is not all that hard these days. But I think they're going to be the most improved team. And I think because Brett Brown has just been through coaching hell for the last few years, there's a huge amount of sympathy among the voters. And voters would love to give him the award. So if the Sixers have a big improvement this year, and I think they will, that I think he's just going to be somebody people are happy to vote for. I think he's going to run away with it.
I like that pick a lot, actually, because we've had a lot of conversation about the 76ers and how good can they really be. And I think it does become a matter of more than just market improvement for Philly, though. I mean, I think it would have to result in a playoff push, or a playoff berth, I should say, not a push, a playoff berth for Philly for Brown to capture that. So I think that's a good pick. I also think, looking at the case of Miami and Eric Spoelstra, we've talked about it a lot as well too. Is Miami more the second half team or more the first half team? And how good of a start can they start off with this upcoming season? Do they get to a mid-seed in the Eastern Conference this year as well too? And then the aforementioned Billy Donovan, with the OKC Thunder, same thing. I think with all the moves that his general manager made too, that would allow him potentially to go ahead and take this award. But I am going to go with Billy Donovan. So that gives OKC 2 awards, if you will. But I love the Brett Brown pick as well too by Skelly. I
must have a bunkmate now in Bellevue with that pick that you gave me, Kelly, because I was thinking exactly along those same lines. I think it's about time that the little big dogs start getting a little bit more plug for what they've been doing. So guys like Jason Kidd, guys like Eric Spoelstra, and guys like Brett Brown, I think that all eyes are going to be focused on the Brad Stevens, the Tom Tibbs, and Shaw, to your point, the Billy Donovans, simply because of how much more overkill can they do on what they were able to achieve just this past season. But if there's one person I think that could actually stand out and take the mantle, so to speak, of that Coach of the Year award, as a little big dog, I think it's going to wind up being Brett Brown. I was leaning more towards Jason Kidd, but again, it's kind of like, I know, so it's like a double-edged sword with this basketball team, simply because they are still dealing with playing against the likes of the Cleveland Cavaliers. But if you think about it, the Philadelphia 76ers are in a really good situation. They're playing in the Atlantic Division. They're playing in a division where, even with what Brad Stevens has with the Boston Celtics and with what Dwayne Casey has with the Toronto Raptors, this team can compete with those guys. And if they're anywhere in the fold of being first, second, maybe even third, right, within any of those ranges within the Atlantic Division, it could still mean a high end somewhere on that ladder of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, which bodes well and boosts and amps up the idea that Brett Brown is deserving of winning this particular award. And I just think that the talent level is there. It's just a matter of, will they be able to get those wins? I think that the wins are there. Remember, the Eastern Conference is still not the strongest conference. So some of those losses that the Philadelphia 76ers suffered last season, I think that they actually have the additional talent necessary to get a couple of those extra wins. And I think in the end of it, Brett Brown, if this is a team that's above 500, maybe 6-7 games above 500, a mid seed in the playoffs, I think it's hard pressed that you don't give this guy the award.
Well, yeah, if they get that, then hand him the award right now. I can't see, Philly winning. What would that be, like 46 games, 47 games? That's a lot, marked improvement for them too. But another name I think to keep an eye on is Quinn Snyder in Utah. If he can somehow keep that team afloat, that might be something to consider. But Kelly, before we move on out of the coach here, just real quick for you, do we have Warriors fatigue? Are we just tired? And no matter what the Warriors and Steve Kerr do, does he just not deserving of an award this year potentially?
Yeah, I think he's got a little bit of that Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich thing going now, where it's just, it's just the best coach not named Greg Popovich or Steve Kerr this year, Gotcha. We take a look at this award as, okay, whoever made the most difference this year. And so when you're doing it every single year, it's hard to see a difference. So it's hard to see the coaching there. He's actually too dismissed as far as his coaching goes. Like, I think a lot of people are just like, well, yeah, anybody could take that talent and be winning 70 games. But I don't think that's true at all. There was a great article, how he devised the offense and everything. People should read that. This is really Steve Kerr's baby, and not just anybody could have made the Warriors the Warriors. He really is kind of a genius when it comes to designing this offense and everything. So people need to give him credit. But how many years in a row can you give it to him? When you're winning 70 games every year, what are you going to do?
No. I said I have to agree. Like, it comes down to fatigue. I think it happened. It happens in almost every award. Earlier in the mid '90s or whatever, Jordan with the MVP just got tired of giving it to Phil. Same thing recently. I think when LeBron, when it comes to his MVP candidacy and things like that, it's just, all right, can somebody else finally take this guy, because we're just trying to doing the same thing. Which is weird, because then you look at 6-man history and how Crawford got it multiple times. So there's like so many inconsistencies in these things. But I do think with Steve Kerr, it is unfortunate, because no matter what Golden State does, I don't know that he's going to be a realistic candidate for this award, and he obviously should be all the time.
And I legitimately think the Warriors could win 75 this year.
Oh God!
I mean, they could have the best Warriors season yet. Like, I think they're just going to just curb stomp their way all the way to the finals.
Right, and that would be very reminiscent of think that Bulls team too. That kind of came back, and it was like, all right, they're good, and then they got better, and they took that next regular season so to heart to kind of prove things well. And again, obviously, ended up in a championship as well. But I think you're right. Golden State has all the tools to be a 70+ win team this year, and that's, again, if they stay focused and really want to. But again, time will definitely tell when it comes to that. And, Steve Kerr, like you said, is the architect.
All right, let's go ahead and we got two more awards to discuss here, and that one being the Defensive Player of the Year award, the DPOY. Last year, it was the Dre Day. Draymond Green taking that award. Kelly, I'm going to start with you. Who do you have slated to take the Defensive Player of the Year award?
This one, I think we need to actually discuss the nature of this award because, like we've been talking about, each award kind of has its own personality and history. And the Defensive Player of the Year award, more than any award, is like a heritage award along with that season. It's hard for a player to come out of nowhere and win Defensive Player of the Year. It's like somehow, maybe because it takes a little longer to develop the reputation or whatever, it's like last year matters in this year's Defensive Player of the Year voting. Whether it should or not, it does. So with that in mind, it becomes okay, whose turn is it to win an award? And I think this year it's Rudy Gobert's turn. And I think with Gobert, he is what I like to call a court shrinker. On offense, the whole notion is to stretch the court, right? To have 3-point shooters that can pull defenders out and open up space and make it harder for the defense to cover the whole area. Well, Rudy Gobert has the opposite effect. He guards the rim so well. He can come out so far. He can guard so much area underneath the basket by himself that he actually shrinks the court. And because he's so good at shrinking the court, it makes all the other players around him better defenders because they just have less space to defend. They have less room to worry about. If they get beat, he's going to be there to back them up. With all due respect to Draymond and Kawhi, I think he's probably the best defensive player in the league right now.
I like your pick, Kelly, because I was going to basically say I think this is going to wind up being Gobert's award to lose more so than worrying about what he has to do to win. And I think the only reason why I'm saying that is I'm not saying he's head and shoulders the best of the best, but I think the focus is going to be center of attention. And I think that that's what Rudy Gobert is going to command, especially if we're talking about the Utah Jazz not completely falling off the table, given what they achieved last season. We saw how important Rudy Gobert was to that basketball team. And you can make the argument that Rudy Gobert was more important to that basketball team than Gordon Hayward. And I think he's going to get his opportunity to do that. Last season, 14 points, 12.8 rebounds. And I think the other point to what you were saying, Kelly, with regards to what Rudy Gobert does that doesn't normally get emphasized, is his ability to rebound the basketball has improved, and I think it's going to improve again. And when you have a player like Gobert, whose defensive rebounding is limiting other teams in a very offensive-minded NBA, limiting their opportunities to make shots, whether it be interior or shooting long range, because he's in there gobbling rebounds, defending, blocking shots at the rate that he's doing it. He, to me, I think should have been what we were talking about with DeAndre Jordan in those 2 seasons, I think 2-3 years ago, where he was always considered as Defensive Player of the Year, just never lived up to what we thought we were seeing from him. I think Gobert is that standard, and I think it's going to get recognized this year, even though I'm sure that there's going to still be strong numbers coming from the Kawhi Leonards and the Draymond Greens of the NBA. I think this is the year of the Gobert. Mark it down. The Stifle Tower reigns in the NBA for the 2017-18 season. Shaw?
Well, there's no reason to belabor the issue then, right? Because I think this is the first time we'll all be in agreement. Kelly's point earlier that I think it's just his turn.
I get to book. I get to book a reservation with you in Bellevue too.
Oh man, all three of us, right there, brother. And again, I think, like I said, it is his time. Draymond and Kawhi, they've had their turns, if you will. And although they're maybe a little bit more versatile because they can guard more guys per se, I think Gobert is just going to have such a massive role in Utah and trying to stabilize that franchise and make sure that they don't fall too far without Gordon Hayward being on that roster. So I agree. Go to Rudy Gobert for defensive player of the year for sure.
All right, man. You know, that only took the second to the last award that we've been discussing for us to all be on the same page. But I think I like this. I like where we're trending.
We're building our synergy.
We're building. Yeah, we're building. Well, we only got one more left to go. So let's see if we can get that last one right. Callie Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast with our special guest, Kelly Scaletta. He is a feature writer for BBall Breakdown, Dime Mag, Bleacher Report, and Fan Rag. Be sure to check him out on Twitter at Kelly Scaletta. All right, so the last one, of course, we saved the best for last. That's the MVP award. Last year, I think it was hard to argue Russell Westbrook getting that award, all historic numbers, you know, for the point guard. And listen, even with the additions, people are still making that push that he can replicate it and do it again. Why? Because it's Russell Westbrook. So I'm going to start with you on this. Yeah, right? I'm going to start with you on this one, Shaw. Who do you think is going to be hoisting that MVP trophy come season's end?
All right. So again, I'll be brief and kind of go into the history of this award a little bit. You know, people are tired of LeBron winning, but he probably has as good a chance as any this year. Kevin Durant, same thing. If the Golden State wins 70+ games, has a chance. Giannis Antetokounmpo, same with Milwaukee. Could be in for an MVP season? I think John Wall is a sleeper. Kyrie Irving is a sleeper as well too. But kind of even going by the last conversation that we just had regarding Defensive Player of the Year, I think it might be Kawhi Leonard's turn. Assuming he's healthy. So I mean, that's obviously a huge caveat. But if the Spurs can somehow keep in that mid-50ish win range, almost up to 60, a lot of people and a lot of those smarter people, if you will, on basketball Twitter, if you will, we're making the conversation that, yeah, well, although Harden and Westbrook were putting up these crazy statistics, it was Kawhi's numbers because of his offense, because of his defense and things of that nature that really should have led him to be the MVP. And he did sneak in a couple first place votes. So I think this is going to be the year, if he can keep that Spurs team at a high level in the Western Conference, that he's going to take the award.
Yeah, I thought about this one a lot, and it's I've never had less certainty going into the season than I do right now. I'm going with James Harden right now. He's finished second 2 out of the last 3 years. He's so efficient. I think that people lose sight of that. Like, his effective field goal percent, like his field goal percentage isn't that great, but because he shoots such a high rate of threes and his free throw rate is so high, he's actually got a really high true shooting percentage. Like last year, he was the only player in NBA history last year with 25 points, 10 assists, and a 60% true shooting percentage. So like that kind of offensive catalyst to be that efficient is pretty unusual and unique. But the problem has always been his defense. He does so much on offense that he just doesn't have any energy on defense. When he needs to, there will be times like in the clutch and stuff where he can kind of gear it up a little bit, but he tends to take plays off. He dives on screens, things like that. And so I think what's going to happen is this year he's going, because Chris Paul is there sharing that burden of carrying the offense with him. I think he's still going to have MVP type numbers, but I think he's going to have more energy to invest on defense. Like people love this kind of, they love a story of somebody that has improved. Like after they tear somebody down, everybody, the media loves to build somebody up, like the Phoenix from the ashes type thing. So I think he's going to get the narrative. And I think the Rockets are going to have a better record than the Spurs. And I think that's going to be what gives it to him over Kawhi. So that's my crazy prediction. And my long shot, super dark horse is Jimmy Butler.
Oh, are you like, I mean, my God, are we like ESPN? We're like brothers in another life, Kelly? I don't understand. Oh, man. First of all, great sleep dark horse pick, because it's interesting, Shaw. I figured you would have thrown Jimmy Butler's name in the mix in this. And I think he's somebody that would definitely get consideration. I think when you look at this, though, the MVP award, I really think it's going to wind up going to James Harden. And I'm just going to only add 1 point to the point that you made, Kelly, because everything that you said was spot on from my perspective about why he's probably going to wind up winning this award. I think the interesting thing that you look at with James Harden and the question of his defense, he had a pretty good defensive player next to him in Patrick Beverley, but he wasn't the most respected player that was along that roster, right? Like, he earned that respect because he was a guy that was undrafted, when he really gave him a chance, and he clawed his way up there. And here, a guy like James Harden, the keys have been handed to him. And I think when a player of James Harden's magnitude, you're trying to command him to play better, you need someone of his ilk. Either someone that's been in the league long time or has shown accomplishments and achievements that is either more than or equates than or is more than what James Harden has done in order to get through to him, that he has to work on these other aspects of his game if he expects to either win these type of awards or to be where he thinks he sees himself being. And I think the fact that Daryl Morey getting Chris Paul, as crazy as it sounds, and people are saying, oh, this is that was wild, I don't know whether or not this works. I think it works perfectly. I don't know if Morey did this intentionally. He's saying, look, this is what we're going to do in order to get you this MVP award. We're going to give you Chris Paul. But I believe that if anyone is going to command James Harden to play better on the defensive side of the basketball and even help him on the defensive side of the basketball, it's a Chris Paul-like type of player. Because in no way are we saying that Chris Paul is going to steal James Harden's thunder from winning this award. What it's going to be in question is, will Chris Paul's influence as a point guard, a veteran basketball player, a guy who's been, struggling to get himself to that top of the mountain thing of getting to the Western Conference Finals or even to an NBA Finals, will he help what is essentially one of the premier superstars in the league take that next step so he can hoist that mantle of being the most valuable player of the year? And I think that move that Morey makes in bringing Paul over there is what's going to be key to help the one aspect that I think is hindered James Harden from winning the awards that he was in those considerations for 2 of the last 3 years, which are the defensive numbers. So to me, I think it's going to wind up going to James Harden. I think you're going to see the same offensive numbers. The efficiency is definitely going to be there, but I think he's going to improve in some areas defensively that's going to put him in that conversation. And I'm not saying he's going to run away with it, but he's certainly going to be right there. And if nothing else, he is going to wind up being deserving if he plays the way that I think he's capable of playing. And then you also sprinkle the fact that I think the Rockets are going to have a better record than the Spurs. It's kind of hard not to give the award to Harden.
Well, I thought you were going to add too much on to what Kelly said, and that was a lot. But no doubt, I can definitely appreciate, those picks, and I think it makes a lot of sense, one way or the other. And it will be interesting to see what happens. And again, does the winning of the Rockets, I think we all agree that the Rockets will be a better overall team than the Spurs this year. So does that come into play, or do some of these other stories, kind of come into play as well too, with Durant or LeBron or Giannis or John Wall or Jimmy Butler? That's what makes it fun, man, and that's why I think this was a great show, because we have so many different takes and so many different ways that we're looking at these awards and how this upcoming season can play out. So Kelly, any final thoughts before that you get out of here, man? Thanks so much for joining us, but make sure you tell everybody where you can find us or find you, and what are you working on next as well, man?
I have an article that just dropped today on Bleacher Report, where I interviewed Mike D'Antoni about the fit between Chris Paul and James Harden, and what that means. Great article, great input from Mike D'Antoni there. And so you can find that. You can find me on FanRag, and you can find me at Kelly Scaletta on Twitter.
Well, he is also dubbed as America's #1 pundit. And by all means, he's probably Mike D'Antoni's newest and bestest publisher, sports publisher on the NBA side, our man Kelly Scaletta. Kelly, thank you so much for jumping on board with us this week and giving us your predictions of who you see hoisting some of these premier awards for this upcoming NBA season, man.
Oh, no problem.
Phenomenal discussion of the NBA awards. The predictions. So, I mean, it's always great when you have very knowledgeable guys who are definitely on the cusp. They're right there. They got their eyeballs on everything that's happening, talking to important heads and really giving great insight and perspective of, why we're selecting. And even to Kelly's point, the people that he sees as the emerging stars and also predicted trophy winners for this upcoming season, man.
Yeah, I think this was a show where you got more than you bargained for. Yeah, most shows will just say, here's where I think it's going to win, throw some stats behind it. But we actually got into some of the philosophical differences and maybe things that are wrong with these awards and how they're kind of decided, if you will, too. And having a guy like Kelly who's writing for multiple sites, has been around this business for a long time. I was very excited to kind of get his insight into even kind of what he thinks about when he's making his predictions, and why some of these awards are maybe even a little bit off basis, especially when it came to the Sixth Man Award. So again, I think this was a great conversation. I hope our fans enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think what this also does, Shaw, is that it opens up the door for people to not just look at the same names that are printed on the pages. There are some players that I think don't get a lot of plug and play, maybe because of the markets of where they're situated, the teams that they represent, and where things stand from what they achieved last season, that we might have to give them considerations for this year. And I think it's great when you have the meeting of the minds of other people who've got their ears to the ground on, how these players are coming into this season, their mindset. Notice how we didn't mention anything about Paul George winning MVP. I think we can agree on the fact that while Paul George believes that he's going to be the MVP, I'm sure Russell Westbrook is looking at him saying, yeah, you may think that if you want, brother. You know what I'm saying? But great show all around, man. And once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for tuning in with us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. NBA season tip-off, it's happening this week. So definitely take a listen to our show so you can keep your eyes peeled. Maybe your favorite player has been considered in one of these awards that we've made these predictions on. And we definitely want you to stay on board with us through the course of the NBA season as we discuss the hot button topics that are happening in the association. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you next time.